There we go. So again, thanks very much for joining me today. Jamie Wallace here. And today what I thought I would do, I don't expect there'll be a huge amount of questions, but I think it'd be a great idea just to do a very brief overview of the OSU platform to maybe help some of you navigate that. As well, we're just going to go through, let's see here, a bit of Q&A, and it's often best with a group of this size that just going to have everybody muted. But what we're going to do is if you do have a question, I'm going to have you pop it in the chat, or there should be a Q&A that you can also engage, and then we'll unmute you and you can go ahead and ask the question and we can be live that way. So hopefully that works out for everyone. But let me just share my screen here. There we go. So the one thing I was just going to point out to everybody, this is my screen when I log on to the OSU site, and yours will probably be a little bit different. One of the things that took me a little while as an instructor just to get used to was the workflow here, and it's not, in my opinion, the most intuitive website to follow, but there may be a few things here I can help you out with. So when you, I tell you what, let's just go back to when I'm logging on here. So you'll have your course listed there and you log in, and I'm not exactly sure how that works for you, but you'll probably have this this page when you first log on. And when we go to the discussion board, let's say we're going to that 1 week introduce of yourself. So I don't believe you have a choice here. You're going to Jamie's group. But one of the things that might be really helpful for you is if you go up to the top and you can see the next thread under Jamie's group here is a discussion menu. So if you press on that, you're going to get a list of all the discussion boards, and you'll see there's a help board at the top. There's an open thread to post any question you wish. It's really for interaction for all the students. I'm going to post all the Zoom meeting links in this board here, along with all the recordings, a link to all the recordings. And as well, you'll see as we go through the course, I will kind of bump up all the different lessons as they become pertinent. So that might help you out a little bit. Let's see here. So yeah, I think the next thing to do here, aha, so we have a question here from Jesse. Says, I don't have access to the help discussion nor open discussion group. I'll tell you what, Jesse, I'm just going to try and unmute you here.
I mean, I can unmute myself. I don't have access to the top two. Jamie's help discussion board or open discussion thread. I don't have access to either one of those.
Wow. Okay. Well, I will ask Andrew about that.
What happens if you click on the 3 dots next to one of those?
Well, for me, they would be, I can unpin them, I can move them and delete them.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So if, for instance, for all students, if you're in a discussion board and you have those buttons at the top, oops, not that one. We'll go to one where you're actually posting an assignment. So let's go to number 1 here. If you go up here, you'll have show rubric, and that's a fairly important thing to keep your eye on. when you're putting together your assignments, because it's the rubric. If I go there, if it's the rubric that I base all my grading on. So as you're putting your assignment together, if you just make sure that you're covering off all of these different items, you're good to go. And that really helps streamline our time together, right? Because often if you're rushed and you're not really checking in with the rubric, you may miss a few things. So, or you may put in a lot more effort than needed. And what you'll also notice here is the marks that are being added really do relate to the importance. So let's say your site map is 7 and your personal survey is 2, and you put a huge amount of effort into your survey and you just skim through the site map, well, that's probably not a great way of allocating your time, right? Because even with this is obviously the first time we've run this course in a 20-week format, but even with that, you'll probably find that you really need to be careful of where you put your energies, because there's so much content to go through. It really is a heavy duty course that way. And I'm very happy we're going into a 20-week format, at least with this version. So I think you'll find it a lot more relaxing. And of course, these every other week, when we have these Zoom sessions, it gives everybody a chance to ask any questions they might have. And another thing I'm going to do is just take a look at the week ahead. So we're looking at the personal survey and all, these are just very basic questions that are being asked. The design site, that's a fairly important section that you want to focus on. I'm just taking a look at the chat here. So there's a few people here that are not getting access to that discussion group. Well, that's interesting. Okay, so Jesse Baker. Let's just unmute Jesse Baker.
Hey there, Jamie.
How you doing?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you. Thanks for being here today. So when you go on your screen and let's say you do press the discussion board link at the very top here, do you get at least some of what you're seeing on my screen here?
Yeah, I see some of it, but I definitely don't see the help discussion board and the open discussion board.
Okay, well, it may be something that I've done. I think I've solved that. They've made a few changes here this year to how we put together discussion boards. So it looks like I didn't publish it. So there you go. You should see it now.
Awesome.
So thanks for pointing that out.
I see it now.
Yeah. So sorry about that. I hadn't had to do that before, but you learn something every day. Okay. I think maybe what I'll do, I'll just quickly go over again the assignment and the template, and then we'll just sort of put out to everybody any questions they might have, and we can take a look at it. I mean, week 1 is pretty mild. You'll notice it's very, you're just basically telling us a little bit about yourself, your design site, and a bit about the climate that is relating to that design site. So if we look at the template file here, I'm not sure everybody has decided to use this or not, but I would certainly recommend using it. We started using this template file last year, and it really has helped, if nothing else, the graphics, the graphical end of people or of student submissions, because before you know, I guess when we look at design, in my opinion, there's two parts to it. There's the creative process of it, and then you're trying to get your thoughts onto paper and you're graphically representing that. So the template here, the template file really does help that out. And if we go to week number 1 or assignment 1, you can see that anywhere where we have highlighted text is where you want to be, you know, filling that in. And you go through each page here. It's pretty straightforward. And granted, there'll be a little bit of a learning curve for some people on this. And if you do run into any challenges, you know, don't hesitate to drop me a note. I have most of Monday that I spend on any work with OSU on a number of their different programs. And currently I'm on a job site between Tuesday and Friday. So it's my time between those days during the week is, you know, limited to when I get home from my job. So it's a little harder to get a hold of me during the week, but I'll certainly answer any questions, you know, within a 24-hour period. That just won't be immediate. Does anybody have any questions about the template at all? Is that something that looks relatively straightforward, or just kind of putting it out there to see if anybody has any concerns, any questions? I think
it looks like the numbering on a lot of stuff was switched around between 2 and 3. But it looks like that was addressed in the main help thread.
Between slide 2 and 3?
No, sections 2 and 3. It looks like they were swapped. All the other ones have design site is 3, and then climate survey is 2. And then if you look at all the numbering for the images within 2 and 3, they're also swapped.
Right. Yeah. So I imagine there's going to be a few little anomalies as we go through. But the nice thing is we have all the content here, so it may have a slightly different number. You're right. In previous courses, this template was so large that we would have optional parts of it. But for you guys, we want to see, because we've extended this out to 20 weeks, we want to see you know, filling in all assignments. So I do have a question here from Marion. She has a question about the sources for data. How about Marion, I'm going to unmute you here. Oh, sorry, I might have just muted you again, Marion. Oops.
Oh, sorry. Do you hear me?
There you are. So you have a question?
Yes, I wasn't sure if I can just use any random, I don't know, site from the internet that gives me data about the rainfall or things like that. Or there are resources provided that
there are.
I don't know. Yeah.
There are some resources provided. If you find something that's outside of those, no problem at all.
Okay.
It'd be great if you listed the source, because we're always interested in new sources for climate data. There are so many, but in the US, or I'll just say North America, it's quite easy to get climate data close to your project site. And that's one thing you might find tricky. You might be in a location outside of a major or not in a major city. So if you're outside, you may not have a weather station close to you. So if that's the case, just look for something that is the closest. That okay. May be, yeah, and often it's an airport. But it's nice to get a good handle on your climate. And that does take a little bit of work. That'll probably be the one part of this assignment that takes you the most amount of time. Yeah. So does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent, excellent. That's great. Okay. Yeah, so the climate again is a very important one. Some people might find trying to get US hardiness, the USDA hardiness zones, for instance, even in Canada, there's different numbers, which is crazy, but that's the way it is. And you can do a number of different things. Hopefully, for those students outside the US, you can try and find the USDA hardiness zone. That makes it easiest if we're all using the same, the same type of zones. In Canada here, they bump it up by 1. So a zone 7 in the US would be a zone 8 in Canada, which is kind of funny. It may be because we have slightly, we have a tundra or a very cold climate in the north. I'm not absolutely sure why they've done that, but again, these are different pages you have, and to highlight some of the most important ones, in my opinion, would be we definitely want your coordinates, and the elevation's super helpful. Record high temperature is a very good one. Now, average temperature is also handy to have. When we get into the rainfall data and temperature data is here, that's great, but the average is a good one. So I'd be looking at average through the year, not so much month to month. If you can't find that, that might be a bit tricky, but your year and how that rain falls during the year is also tricky, because you may have, where I live in British Columbia, we get about, just over 1,000 millimeters. I think that's around 42 inches. And there may be another part of the world that has the exact same rainfall data, and you'd see that as a similarity, but the seasonality of it may be completely different. So where I live, it's more of a dry growing season and a wet winter. So we're just coming into our wet season, which is good. We've had quite a drought and some extreme high temperatures this summer. And yes, there's a wind direction here. So all of these are super interesting things to take a peek at. And then we have the SWOT analysis, which is really helpful. You may find it a little bit of work to sort of dial into this, but as we go through the different varying assignments, it really helps to point out what some of the, exactly what the strengths and weaknesses and the things that we want to design around, right? So, with our climate, if one of our threats is drought or flooding, well, we know as we get a little bit further into our design process that we'd want to be ensuring that we're addressing those as best we can. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. Let's see here if I've got anything else. Yeah, I didn't have anything else I wanted to cover. Is there, I'll just sort of open it up for everybody. We can talk about anything outside of this week. If you have any questions regarding any part of the course or how, the expectations. I will say that at the top of each of the discussion boards, there are usually some examples, some student examples. That might be under resources here. They have changed the layout of this a little bit. I'll go down to the bottom, see, no. So there are usually student examples. If you have any qualms about what your assignment should contain or should look like. And it's funny, I don't see student examples listed here, so I'm going to ask Andrew about that, because those are super helpful to have. And regardless of whether we have, let's see here, regardless of whether we're in the PDC Pro or in the original course, shouldn't make any difference at all.
They're listed in the template.
Unless they've, sorry, what was that?
The examples, there are examples in the template.
There are in the template. Okay. Yeah, they used to have them on the discussion board itself, the finished product. So I'll ask Andrew about that.
Sorry, at the very top, if you scroll to the right on the first.
Yeah, you have
first
to.
slide. Yeah.
Okay, we'll go back to. Well, that's good that somebody's been exploring this. Yeah, I don't think my screen's quite large enough here. Okay, well, I will ask about that. It's nice to have, it also might be in a different part of the platform itself. I'll have to do a little bit of digging. I've gone through at least 20 of these courses, and you'd think that whenever they change, it throws us off a little bit. The content's still the same. So that's the big part. And that's the biggest part about the template. It really does help to streamline the graphical end of it, so you're not having to worry about that. Yeah, so I just got a little message here from, let me see here, from Mark. Are PDFs, files, links in Google suitable alternates for submitting? Yes, they are, Mark. Here, I'll just unmute you here. Hey, Mark.
Hi there. I would like to use a PowerPoint to generate the report, and I'm wondering if I could just each assignment turn in a PDF of where the report is at and submit that, either a report or a link in Google Drive.
Yes, I might suggest that you try and link it. And the reason for that is, as we go along in the course, the file, your file is going to get larger and larger. And it may, I have had instances where students have had troubles uploading and then others downloading to observe somebody's file. So that's something you might want to consider. You don't have to, like, for instance, if I was taking this course, I wouldn't be necessarily using the Google slide. Well, I would perhaps use this template, but I'd be using a different software to generate my ideas. So that's another thing. If you prefer a different software, you can always grab a screenshot from that and drop it into the appropriate space on the template itself.
Okay.
Yeah. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. And Amy. Aha. So you're saying that the examples are in the resources. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. A little harder to get to, but they definitely used to have it at the top of the discussion page, but there used to be so much material there. I don't think everybody slowed down and saw it all. Oh. Okay, so we can go back to lesson 1. Okay, Jeannie's got a question here. Go ahead, Jeannie.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if you have a program you recommend for the landscape design part of it that's something that's not too expensive that would be okay for personal use instead of using graph paper?
Right. Well, that's a good question. There are a few things you can do if you absolutely want to do it by hand, and I'm not saying yourself, but for anybody, if they're not comfortable using any graphics software, then going the route where you're drawing by hand is an excellent way to go, and maybe just taking a picture or scanning that in and dropping it into the template file. That's a great way. Now, if you're not, if you're looking at using the computer, there's a few really good ways to go. I have an iPad Pro that I use for work as well. If you have that, there's a really interesting software called Trace. And it is extremely low cost. And you can create some really interesting graphical presentations with it. It's not an all-in-one complete design software by any means, but it you may find that really helpful. If we get into desktop applications, there are a number. There should be a reasonable list under the resource page of, I think there's Inkscape is one of them. It's kind of a tough one to fit. I found Trace to be the best so far, but of course you have to have an iPad for that, because I think it's only about $35 a year, so it's super low cost. And the software I use for my work, it's going to be around $4,000, right? So either have to be full on using it every day to justify the cost, or look at something that's quite a reduction in terms of features and what you're going to do with that. But in this class, we're really just looking at graphically, applying different line shapes and maybe some color. Right? We're not asking it to generate plant lists, or, there's all these other powerful tools that these higher end softwares will use. We can go into 3D, we can do all sorts of things. So Jesse here is saying Krita and GIMP or free Photoshop. Yeah. And so Trace work for the purposes of this course, an alternative. So Trace, Jeannie, are you meaning Trace in terms of the software I just mentioned, or? Yes. So Trace would be excellent to establish your base plan. And what it does is it'll allow you to add layers to it. So as we go through the water layer, etc., you can create a layer and draw right over it, and then you can control the visibility of it. So if you don't want that to show in a different part of the course, you can remove it, but not lose it. So yes, now the downside of Trace would be it doesn't come with a lot of instruction. So you'll have to dive into some, there's some YouTube videos on some basic how-tos with it. So it's a very low cost, but a little bit of a learning curve with it. But if I was starting out in this business today, that's probably what I would start with, is an iPad, and just do my best with that. And for this course, it would be great. Yeah, it's not an all-in-one, but I find it really easy to use, and we don't use it to present graphics in our business, but we certainly use it for sketching ideas on. It's a really quick way of applying some concept ideas. So I hope that was helpful, Jeannie. If you run into any trouble with that, let me know. If you have an iPad, then you're good to go. You should be able to download that and again, look for some tutorials on that through YouTube. Yeah. Okay. So is there anything else anybody would like to chat about today? I'm sure as we get into the course a little deeper, there's going to be a lot of questions that got flushed out, especially when we get to the water, the week where we're dealing with water. That's a pretty heavy duty assignment, and that's probably the hardest for most people. So I don't think that occurs until what was normally week 5. So I'm not sure what it would be now. Yeah. Yeah, so I just sort of throw it out there to everybody. If you have any, oh, here we go for Jesse. How did Amy navigate to the resource page? Well, let's take a look. I think you have to, once you're in Jamie's group, you've got to get out of that. So if I go and log in again, you can see I got a few classes to go here. So modules, it may be in the modules. So this is a good, there we go. So here is, you have to get to this as you're logging in on the site. It's pretty much impossible to navigate from a group. But you can see there's a bunch of information on where to start, and then there's resources. You can also post questions on Andrew's help discussion board, but you know, if you do have questions, it'd be great to start or post the same thing on my board as well. That'd be great. And there's been on template here and graphical software. So if we press that, you get a little bit of info on, there's not a huge amount here. So there's an article on some free software. But honestly, if you feel that you are quite comfortable on the computer, then using a new software would be a good fit for you. But in the past, I have seen people that have a challenge with that try and learn new software, and then they spend a lot of their time doing so, and it sort of takes them away from their focus on the course. So I would say if it's just not working and not comfortable, to switch to hand drawing, and that can be quite easy. So if it was me, I would use the graph paper. Then I would use trace paper overlays. So if you had a graph paper with your base plan, then all the other assignments, you could just put trace paper over it and add information that you're being asked to include. Okay, so that could be, you know, all the way up to the final design. And that way, it's easy to edit, and you don't, you know, you can include or not include what layers you want. But it is slightly different. You know, in the old days in landscape architecture, for instance, they would use very large sheets, like a 24 by 36 sheet, and then that would get they would take that and print from it, so you'd get a black and white paper print off of it. But again, it's you know, in this day and age, that's a little bit onerous, because for what I use in particular, I can just click on say a new planting, it'll tell me how many square feet it is, how many plants I need. You know, there's all these these little tools that are really helpful if you're using it day to day. But for you guys, the hand-drawn is completely fine, or anything else that fits into your comfort level. So hopefully that was helpful. And Jesse, do you see how we got to that? Are you good with that? Yeah, okay. Yes, and that's part of the challenge with this platform is you can't access everything you need once you're into the group. You got to sort of back up a little bit, right? If you're looking at resources. And then, there's some here's all of our different lessons and some of the materials associated with that. So we're going from climate to landform to site analysis, and I don't have to go through all of these, but you can see when we get to number 5, that's a tricky one, and there's 24 points associated with that. So that'll be in a little while. Yeah. So is there anything else I can help you guys out with today? Like I say, it's week 1, and there's I don't imagine there's a huge amount of questions out there, but it's good to connect with you all. And this is a new process for us, so it's really nice. I think all the instructors will find it quite nice that we're able to do a little bit of one-on-one here. Okay, so Kim has a question about timeline for the assignments. So yeah, that is something that's not completely clear if you go to the discussion board. But if you are in that module, I believe under the syllabus that we're going to have that. Oh, sorry, going down the wrong. Oh, no, that was it. Oh God, wrong button. All right, there we go. So if you go to the syllabus page, you get all of the due dates. And that's probably something I will pop a note to Andrew about. We'll be probably asking you guys at the end, all of, for some feedback on how you could see this being streamlined and improved, but this might be one of them. So due date is next Monday for lesson number 1. So, and then it'd be every 2 weeks from that point, and it's usually 9 a.m. And if I notice that some people have already submitted, that's great to see. That's excellent. I typically won't grade anything until 9 a.m. on the 11th. And part of the reason is I have Mondays allocated for this work, and then the rest of the week I'm pulled in other directions. So I just don't have the available time. I do have time to answer questions, but it's when we're looking at grading assignments, it's a much more involved process. And I'll just tell you, typically what I do is every instructor is going to be a little different, but I've found the most effective thing for myself is I'll bring up your assignment on my screen here, and I'll record feedback. So we'll look at the assignment, and it can very clearly sort of guide. I don't know if that's the right word, but it's a great way of providing feedback. As far as I'm concerned, maybe not so much. Actually, typically the first one I don't, because you're just talking about yourself. But as we get a little further along, and especially week 5, to have a video feedback available, I think that's really helpful for most students. And if for some reason that doesn't work, please let me know, and I can give you written feedback. That's no problem at all. So most people enjoy the video feedback, but if again, for some reason that doesn't work for you, no problem. I can provide it in writing. Okay, so week 5 or lesson 5. Yes, we used to call everything by week. So yes, it'd be lesson. So that would be the lesson just before our Christmas break. And if we go to I don't want to get you guys freaked out about that because I'm just going to go along on the template file. Here we go. We get to a water survey, talk about where your water comes from, where your wastewater goes to, and then we get into watershed mapping. And that is, this exercise is probably one of the trickiest things for a lot of people. And that's one of the reasons I will do video feedback on this, but there are a lot of help resources for this. And if we actually go to that discussion board, they should be pretty clear there. Yeah, so if I ever accidentally say week, it's actually lesson. So this would be lesson number 5, and we talk about water survey, the watershed map. Here's the practice sheet that we want you to complete. Here's some resources. So here's, as you can see, some different images, and there's a number of different videos here. So do keep your eyes open for the resources each week. I wouldn't say they're necessarily a complete list for the entire world, but we cover as much as we can. Okay. So again, the resources are a really good thing to take a peek at, but given we're at lesson number 1, you probably find that you don't need too many resources for that. Okay, so we have a question here about peer review. So the peer review is it's quite easy. So let's say we're in lesson number 1 and we have an assignment that's been submitted. Okay, well, for the peer review, what we'd like you to do is open up the file and take a look at the student's work and just a few sentences of feedback. You know, maybe something jumped out at you, like, wow, your graphics are beautiful, or it's a lovely place you're living, or, you know, awesome ideas, or some, you know, positive feedback or question. You know, or maybe like, oh, why did you put your rain garden where you have it? Is there a reason for that? Or, you know, because we want to be, you know, it is a helpful thing to get everybody engaged in reviewing others' work. And believe it or not, this is it's a great opportunity for everyone to expand their knowledge. Just as an example, with myself, I was with my wife, Angela, we run a little company here. We're a design build company. And early on, we've been doing this 25 years. Early on in our career, you know, all we really saw was our own work. And boy, we loved it. But, you know, you don't, you know, seeing what others do really helps you grow, and it helps that creative process quite a bit. I was heavily influenced by people I worked with early in my career, and it still happens. So this whole process of peer review is sort of setting you up that way, looking at other people's work, you know, having a positive comment about it. If there's something you don't really like on it, you know, I would maybe keep that to yourself. I don't think it's really helpful to point out things like, you know, if there's something terribly wrong, we'll leave that to me. I will, I would point it out in a very, well, in a very positive way, a constructive way. There's really no right or wrongs. It's just an improvement if something needed to be improved, in my opinion. And again, it's all my opinion. So, but the real thing to focus on too is that rubric, is making sure you have all the items in the rubric within your assignment. And in theory, you could have full marks for the course, providing you're allocating all the information that's asked in the rubric. So that's a really long-winded answer, Marion, to your peer review question. But yeah, just a few lines of comment, or if you want, you can place many lines. That's really up to you. Some people have a very easy time writing, and others not so much. I find it personally, I find the video feedback's a lot easier for me to provide. I can provide a lot more feedback in that allotted amount of time, because I've usually, we're trying to stay within a 15-minute time period on each assignment. So you might note in the early assignments, I don't really, like week 1, I may just do a very quick written feedback for your assignment. And don't take that as, oh, I'm not interested or excited about your story. What I often will do is I'll bank some time early to use later on, because when we get to the zone 1 and the final designs in the lesson 9 and 10, those are very large assignments, and they're often a 30-minute session of feedback, depending on the size of the design, what you have in it. But so that gives you a little snapshot of what I do. Yeah, so if anybody's running into trouble, don't hesitate to send me a note through the inbox. So on the left here, if you click that, you can send a message to me, or you can just email me direct, whatever you prefer. It doesn't matter. And I would, be able to answer you as quickly as possible. If it's on a Monday, it'll be a lot faster, my response. If it's during the week, it would be towards the end of the day when I would be able to reply. Yeah, so it looks like a few people have their assignments in. That's great. I won't be looking at these for a week though, so I won't be providing feedback until then. And one of the reasons is it's a really good workflow for myself, and I think that results in better better sharing of information with everybody. Cool. So we're down to our last 10 minutes here. Is there anything anybody would like to chat about, or questions at all, or maybe even you're wondering about your project site, whether it's appropriate or not? That's maybe one thing to consider as you're selecting them. Oh, I've got a question here. Is the peer review in the peer review section? It's showing take a quiz. Yeah, I don't think we do that anymore, so not to worry about the quiz. We did that years ago, but not anymore. So no worries. That's obviously a little bit of text that's been left over. So there's no quiz to worry about. You have your enough in terms of workflow with your assignments and all the content that you have to go through. Yeah, I can't remember what I was discussing about there. Yes, I was talking about the project site selection. So occasionally we get somebody who will select, say, a project site that's got, we'll call it bare land. It may even be a park with no building on. So if you are looking at something that doesn't have a structure on it, just consider that you'd want to put a proposed building on it. So you would just indicate a box or rectangle where you could call it proposed house or proposed what have you. And that'll become obvious or more obvious as we get a little further along in the course. But it's really representing, that primary human activity area, right? And Kim has a question here. Could you talk about what makes an appropriate project site? Okay. It's mostly urban. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So the site size, I've had people that have done balconies, they've done rooftops, really wide range. So to get the most out of this course, I would say having an urban site is completely fine, no problem at all, even down to the smallest little. I've had townhouses with just small spaces outside of that. A third of an acre is a nice size, and I don't think you'd have any trouble with that. So the one thing I do point out to people, sometimes I'll get a student that'll want to have their project site as their urban, it's normally their home, an urban site, but they just want to do the front or the back garden. And I would say that's, maybe not the best idea in this course. You'd want to do that whole project site. And again, that becomes more obvious as we go through the course, why that would be. But it just to get the most out of it for yourself, right? So if you're looking at a very small space, it's just going to constrain what you can do with that. So for instance, if you had, I had a student who was in an apartment in New York and had, their project site was the rooftop, a very small rooftop. So that, that's really hard in terms of rainwater harvesting, managing the rainwater in that area, making the most use of it, that sort of thing. You obviously can't do any rain gardens or infiltration pits on a roof. So it does somewhat restrict you. So I'd say with this go around, you'd want to try and not make your site as large as possible, but have it in such a way where there's an obvious area of human activity and that's about it. So even if it has no house on it, we can just have a proposed dwelling. So that's quite easy. And you may even find, a funny thing is, just as we're kind of finishing up here, most people when they buy property, and we've seen this many, many times with our clients, they'll buy a piece of property and they'll automatically determine where the house is going to go. They'll have in their mind, whoop, I'm going to put the house here. And right now, I'm just, I've been taking the farm design program called the REX program. Darren Doherty in Australia puts this on, and it's in an online format. And there's actually a community called the Agrarian Workplace that is kind of the focus or the center of it. But he has developed an amazing farm design protocol, so which has come from permaculture, from many different design systems, we'll say. And in that, water comes, water is the third item on the list, and buildings is way down the list, right? So things like, if you think about it on a farm setting, the need to control and store water is going to have a higher priority over where you stick your house, right? And that's also a priority over where you place your roads or your access, or where you would place your fencing, or where you'd place, well, we'll call it forestry or any soft landscape. So it's very, very interesting as you get sort of deeper into this whole design, land design, we'll call it protocol, and it's the same with permaculture design. It has its protocol. When we design for urban clients, we use a water access soil protocol. So we first look at water before we even look at access or any living part of the landscape, the soil layer. So that that's a biggie. So I guess where I'm going, long story short, is you may have a blank site, we'll call it bare land, and you may stick a house on there where you initially think a house would be best, and often it's a view, right? My house, where I live, we're on 5 acres, and it's at the top of a slope looking out at a view, and we didn't build it. If we did, it would be halfway down the slope, because where the house is would be an ideal place to put a pond. It would be incredible. We'd have the ability to store hundreds of thousands of gallons. So from a land design point of view, you know, we're prioritizing other things other than just where we're going to sit and observe our environment. Yeah, so if anybody have any other questions before we call it a day today. I don't see any, and that's totally good. Again, if you run into any challenges, you probably won't this week because it's pretty straightforward. But if you do week to week, again, don't hesitate to drop me a note. There's a few ways you can do that. You can also, which I think is a great way to go, is there's the help discussion board. So you can post any questions you have here. And I do keep my eye on this. So if I'm on a job site and come home, that's one of the things that I'll be addressing before anything else. Yeah, so hopefully everybody has a fairly smooth journey in the first couple of weeks here. And yeah, if you don't, let me know. And we're always looking for feedback too. So if you can see a way of things improving, we'd love to hear about it. Okay, well, if nobody has any other questions, we'll stop our recording here, and I'm going to post a link to that recording on the Zoom meeting link discussion board, and that way it'll be easy for everybody to access it. And it'll be a record there that you can go back and reference for as long as you have access to this course. And the previous courses basically have lifetime access. So as long as these servers are operating, you won't be able to post or ask questions in here, but you'll be able to access all the resources. So that's a great, a great thing to have happen. But yeah, so Andrew's done a wonderful job of putting this course together over the last 11 years, and it just keeps getting better. And I hope everybody enjoys it. So thank you very much for all your time today, and really look forward to working with all of you over the next 20 weeks and watching your designs develop. So you take care, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. So every 2 weeks we'll have a Zoom meeting at the same time. Okay.
Thank you, Jamie.
Well, thank you very much. Some good questions today, and everybody take care.